Happy birthday to me. If I timed this right, it should be August 4th, which means that I turned 30 today when you're watching this, if you're watching this when it first gets uploaded. Insert flying car future joke. Anyway, so I've been wanting to do this video for a very long time. This is my top 30 favorite movies, and I've said this before. I have been wanting to do this video since before I was even involved with watching YouTube. So, a little bit of background on this. I'll try not to spend too long. I do want to get this edited before my birthday. Around 2008, I want to say, around 2008, I got into Spill.com, which was also my gateway drug into media criticism. And as part of that, I was like, I wonder what my favorite movies are. And so I wrote down a list of my 100 favorite movies. And I've adjusted and edited that list pretty much every year since then. So from like 2009 is when I actually wrote down my very first list. And I even recorded it. 2009 was 7 years before my first YouTube upload. That's how long this has been in the pocket. But I've been saving it for this special occasion, my 30th birthday. Because at the end of the day, I am still a movie guy. I've fallen away from movies, sure. And so without further ado, I'm not going to do a whole lot of platitudes, and I'm also not going to do any spoiler things for these videos. This is just going to be a quick runoff of my top 30 favorite movies, according to this list that I've been compiling and maintaining for 14 years now. Right out the gate, number 30 is Phoebe and Wonderland. This movie is not objectively good. This is my top 30 favorite movies, not the top 30 movies that I think you need to watch, not the top 30 most important or influential movies, not the top 30 most critically acclaimed worthy movies. These are the 30 movies that hit me where I live, that really were just the right movie at the right time in my life. And Phoebe Wonderland is like the perfect exemplar of that entire concept. This is an indie movie from 2008, so most of you probably haven't watched it, though I have talked about it in the past. This is a movie about a little girl named Phoebe Lichten, played by a young Elle Fanning, who is undergoing some mental issues. Without spoiling anything, she's having these kind of delusions about wanting to become Alice from Alice in Wonderland and wanting to play Alice in her school play, and it's causing a mental breakdown for her. This is a very sweet and charming movie. I haven't shown this movie to anybody who didn't end up liking it, but it is sitting at like a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. Not that that matters, but just goes to show that this is a very cheap, disposable movie at the end of the day. But when I first watched it, this was just the right movie at the right perfect time. More so than any other movie I've ever seen. Number 29 is Back to the Future. Classic time travel movie. Marty McFly is a kid in 1985, even though Michael J. Fox was 27 at the time or something. Anyway, he has a friend who's a scientist. I don't know how that works, but he does, and he builds a time machine, and through shenanigans, Marty McFly ends up in the year 1955, and it's a fish out of water story, and he has to try to find the younger version of his doctor friend and get back to the future before his mom decides to bang him. Explain a movie plot badly. This is just right for that. Number 28 is another movie that kind of came, right movie, right time. But this was actually based on a book that I always admired as a kid, and that is Hugo, directed by Martin Scorsese. This is a 2011 film adaptation of The Invention of Hugo Cabret, about a young boy named Hugo Cabret who is living in the walls of a Paris train station circa 1920s. Not only is this a really charming coming-of-age story, it's also a love letter to film. That's a bit of a trend that I've kind of grown weary of since seeing this movie, but this movie still has a lot of heart. It's actually my favorite Martin Scorsese film, and I think a lot of that's because it's so different from all of his other films, but it's different in a way that, this is the first time that I really felt like Martin Scorsese was putting his heart out there and not just doing what he thought would get him awards. Carrying on, at number 27 is Dead Poets Society, the 1989 film, starring Robin Williams and a young Ethan Hawke. This is the movie that Phoebe and Wonderland was kind of ripping off a little bit. There's a lot of similarities there. I did see Phoebe and Wonderland first. I didn't see Dead Poets Society until I was already in college. I should probably mention my intro to lit teacher from my second year of college, who was a guiding light in my life during that time. He was basically my mentor. He was the one who kind of gave me the tools that I still use to this day as both a critic and a creative. And this is his all-time favorite movie, and he assigned it in class. We were forced to watch it and write a paper on it, and I fell in love with it. This movie is just perfect. It is immaculately made. There isn't a single wasted second in this movie, and that's as someone who values his time, I value movies that just waste no time. And that's what this movie does. Number 26 is Pulp Fiction. I've probably soured on this movie a little bit in recent months. No particular reason, just it's one of those kind of like film bro, kind of played out movies. But anyway, this is Quentin Tarantino. This was his sophomore outing, I believe. It is a kind of crime, thriller, dark comedy, very loosely based on the idea of 1920s Pulp Fiction. Doesn't really have any similarities to the pulps, at least not the pulps I've read, which is probably why my opinion is soured on it. I think this movie was actually higher when I originally did this list. But yeah, it's got a star-studded cast. They're all great. It's still fine. I can see why people would call it overrated, but I still love every minute of it. Number 25 is The Prestige. This is my intro to lit teacher's second favorite movie. This was Chris Nolan, right around the same time he was starting to do his Batman movies. It stars Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, and it's about a pair of rival mages, or rival illusionists rather, who are constantly trying to one-up each other in prestige. And it is a very intricate movie with a very strict attention to detail and a plot twist that is one of the greatest plot twists ever. I don't even want to talk about the overall plot because this is a movie that you should just go into it knowing that it's Chris Nolan. It's told out of order, but the way it's told makes sense and you're still able to follow along with it. And it's about two rival illusionists who are both very deep, compelling characters who have a lot of baggage that comes with them. Number 24 is my favorite Tarantino movie, which is Kill Bill. Cheating a little bit by having both Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 here, but they were written together, they were filmed together. They are a companion piece. You can't really have one without the other. This is a movie about a female assassin who is nearly assassinated, wakes up after, I think it's a 4-year coma, if I'm remembering correctly, and she decides to take vengeance on the 5 people who put her in that coma and seemingly killed her at the time unborn baby. as well as the dude she was going to marry and all of his family and friends, and a lot of other people died, but she mostly cares about the baby. Uma Thurman does a really great job, as does really the entire cast. This is why I don't like talking in platitudes with these sorts of videos. There's only so many synonyms I can come up with for good or great. But yeah, this is my favorite Tarantino movie, as one of my favorite movies within its various subgenres, which it actually inhabits a lot of subgenres. That's another thing that I kind of dig about Tarantino in particular. Number 23 is Spirited Away. So this is the 2001, 2002, depending on where you're from, Hayao Miyazaki movie, Studio Ghibli. It is just a sight. There's nothing else to it. It's just immaculately animated. It's a very cute, charming, but very simple story. You're really here for the animation and the effort on display with that animation. It's one of the greatest animated movies of all time. It tops a lot of people's lists, and for a good reason. Number 22 is Avengers Infinity War. I feel like this is going to be my most controversial pick for this entire list. There was a point where this was even higher. It's really just astounding. I don't think I have to explain this movie to anybody. It is the culmination, or the beginning of the culmination, of 10 years of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All hands are on deck, everyone has a role to play, everyone is relevant, and it is the story of Thanos and his quest to collect the Infinity Stones and snap away half the universe. The reason why this is on the list and no other MCU movie is because it does the impossible by juggling so many characters and giving them all something to do, and giving every single one of them have at least one moment that's like, oh, that was awesome. That's impressive. Just even within like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Endgame didn't achieve that with half the cast. And that's the same writers and directors, the Russo brothers. Other great Marvel movies like Captain America Winter Soldier, or the original Iron Man, or Captain America Civil War, all kind of aped off of other successful movies. Infinity War was kind of in uncharted territory, and territory that hadn't really been done before, and the fact that it worked at all is incredible. It's an incredible feat of filmmaking and production scheduling, if nothing else. Number 21 is A Beautiful Mind. I have not seen this movie in a long time, but I still have very fond memories of it. This is the 2001 Ron Howard movie, starring Russell Crowe as the great John Nash, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, who also suffered from schizophrenia. This movie is haunting, it's eerie, but it's got a lot of charm and wit to it as well. And like I said, I don't remember this movie very clearly because it's been a lot longer since I've seen this than anything else that's in my top 30. So I'm not super confident in really describing what makes this movie so special, but I also don't really have to, because you just have to watch it for yourself and come up with your own opinion. Number 20 is Inception, the second Chris Nolan movie on the list, and not the last. This is a movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio. It came out in 2010, and it is a mind heist. It is a heist film taking place in a dream within a dream within a dream. That's the premise, and it is just an incredible ride, full of twists and turns and cool imagery and awesome action and neat characters. The Chris Nolan's character writing is still his weakest point, and it's the weakest point in all of his films except The Prestige, I would argue. But yeah, I really like Inception. It's another one that, I can't think of a way to make it shorter, which is always a great sign. Number 19 is Spaceballs, my favorite spoof movie. This is Mel Brooks' take on the films that were popular with the kids these days. The kids these days now being the old men, because this movie came out in 1987. But I always admire someone who has a niche but is willing to spread his wings and willing to spread his wings within that niche. Up to that point, Mel Brooks was known for spoofing movies of his childhood. Stuff like the Universal Monster movies or old westerns. This was his attempt at spoofing the movies his kids were into. He didn't really understand Star Wars and Star Trek all that much, but as someone who does, as someone from an even younger generation than that, this movie came out obviously 6 years before I was born. He did a bang up fucking job on this. Like, he is on point, especially with the merchandising scene. I've heard a lot of people call it Mel Brooks' weakest or one of his weakest movies or his last decent movie or a movie that's only good enough, but I'll watch this 50 more times before I sit down and watch Blazing Saddles again. Like, I love Blazing Saddles. It might even be on my list. Let me check that real quick. Blazing Saddles is number 99 on my 100 movie list. I love Blazing Saddles. I love Young Frankenstein. I love Spaceballs a whole hell of a lot more. From my favorite spoof to my favorite western, number 18 is High Plains Drifter. I believe the directorial debut of Clint Eastwood, though nowhere near his film debut. He had been doing movies for like 8, 9, maybe even 10 years before this. But this is a... I know the plot twist has kind of become ubiquitous with this movie, but I'm not going to give it away still, because I was shocked by the revelation at the end. I know that's what this movie's kind of famous for. I'm going to describe it this way. It is about a nameless cowboy or a gunslinger rather, going into a town and kind of beating them all into shape so that they can defend themselves against an approaching bandit trio. There's a lot more going on to this movie than that, but my lips are sealed. I am not even going to say what other genre High Plains Drifter inhabits, because I don't want to give it away to the few people who might not have seen it yet. Number 17 is E.T., another movie I haven't seen in a while. One of the people I hang out with really hates this movie, so that's kind of the things that I almost want to get like really defensive and try to like fight against those criticisms. Oh, it's schmaltzy. Like, yeah, it's for kids. This is an all-ages sci-fi movie about a kid who finds and befriends an alien. It's very charming. It's Steven Spielberg at his most Spielbergian. This is the highest ranked Spielberg movie on my list. It's not the only one, obviously. Jurassic Park is on my list, just not in my top 30. I feel like it should be, though. I feel like maybe next time I edit this list, I'm going to just straight up swap E.T. with Jurassic Park. Number 16 is my favorite straight up comedy, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Depression-era American gospel spoof of Homer's Odyssey, of all things, starring George Clooney as a con man, part of a chain gang, who escapes from the chain gang, or escapes from the prison lineup, and goes on a quest to get his girl back, goddammit. This movie is hilarious, and I quote everything it has ever said. Number 15 is Psycho. The first and not the only time I'll be mentioning Alfred Hitchcock in this. He is the master of suspense, and with Psycho, in my opinion, his last great movie. Throughout the entire 50s, he had done like all these super big, bombastic, like spy thriller type movies, some of which are on the lower parts of this list, like North by Northwest, I think is number 40 something on my list. Rope is also on my list, as is The Man Who Knew Too Much. Psycho was his, like, I'm going to make a movie for a low budget, and it's going to be black and white, and it is going to be gold. And that's exactly what it was. Everyone knows Psycho, everyone knows the book, everyone knows Norman Bates, everyone knows the shower scene. It's so much more than the shower scene, though. It is just a really great thrill of a ride. What's not so thrilling is number 14, Forrest Gump, another movie that I just have every single moment and line just etched into my permanent long-term memory bank. This is a story about a dumbass from Alabama who lives the American dream throughout the second half of the 20th century. It's effectively the life story of this fictional character who goes from, like, meeting Elvis as a kid to fighting in Vietnam, becoming a ping pong champion, becoming a millionaire like shrimp boat captain, and then running around America and coming up with the slogan. And it's also just a really sweet love story that kind of shows the duality of American history throughout that time period, with Forrest Gump taking the high road and Ginny taking the low road. And I really like that dichotomy. Dichotomy is another thing that I really like in storytelling. And this movie does it better than pretty much any movie I can think of. Number 13 is Beauty and the Beast, the 1991 Disney version. This is my favorite 2D animated movie. It's also got my favorite soundtrack of all the Disney movies. Yeah, it's just the perfect retelling and reimagining of that classic fairy tale. And, fuck Disney for ruining it with the remake. Although they didn't ruin my childhood, they didn't ruin Beauty and the Beast, they just made a really shitty adaptation of it. Nothing is taking anything away from the 1991 classic. Number 12 is Citizen Kane. The most boring pick for this list, possibly. Yeah, I think Citizen Kane is one of the greatest movies of all time. Do you have an argument against it? Because I certainly can't think of one. This is the story about Charles Foster Kane, played by Orson Welles, and it's his life story. And it's the story of this journalist trying to uncover the secret of his dying words. But even more than how it pushed filmmaking forward, and just how good of a movie it is and how well it holds up, I appreciate any movie that is willing to take journalists down a peg. I really gave this movie a boost when I saw how self-entitled journalists at the time reacted to it. Number 11 is Fight Club. Maybe, possibly controversial, though this was like 20 years ago, so I think any controversy surrounding this movie is kind of old hat now. This is a movie about just the angst of Gen X's quarter life crisis. That's what this movie is about. But man, so many people have misinterpreted this movie to be something it's not, but it is just a really good romp and also has one of the greatest plot twists of all time. But in my opinion, the plot twist in Fight Club isn't as great as the plot twist in my next pick. Cracking the top 10 is Memento, the first major movie directed by Christopher Nolan and written by Christopher Nolan, based on a short story by his brother Jonathan Nolan. This is the gimmick movie that plays backwards, but it actually has a point. That's the thing that I hate about gimmick movies, especially like nowadays, is that so many times the gimmick is just a gimmick. They don't do anything meaningful with it. There's nothing meaningful about the Spider-Verse cameos. There's nothing meaningful about Michael Keaton being in The Flash. There's nothing meaningful about Birdman being shot all in one take or made to look like it's shot in one take. There is an actual narrative point to Memento being edited backwards. That's the difference between a movie with a gimmick and a great movie that uses a gimmick to emphasize its point. Number 9 on my list is Rear Window, my highest rated Hitchcock film. This is a 1954 movie. This is one of 4 movies I believe he did with Jimmy Stewart. It was Rope, then I think Rear Window, then Vertigo, then Man Who Knew Too Much. James Stewart plays a guy who is in a wheelchair because of a broken leg, and he's got nothing better to do than spy on his neighbors, and he ends up saying what he believes is one of his neighbors committing murder, and he has to try to prove it while constrained to his room. It's a very claustrophobic movie, it's a very suspenseful movie, and it is the movie I would want people to watch if they want to understand Hitchcock, his style, his filmmaking techniques, and his general appeal. Not as much of that in say, Psycho or The Birds or North by Northwest or his older stuff like 39 Steps. Rear Window is kind of just the most Hitchcockian Hitchcock movie that Hitchcock ever made. Number 8 is another instance of me kind of cheating with my usual one film per franchise rule, and that's Lord of the Rings, because fuck you, I love all three of them equally. Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King, coming out in 2001, 2002, 2003 respectively. This is the greatest epic fantasy ever told. It is also, let me double check here, the best straight up adaptation Hollywood ever made. There's like 3 other adaptations higher up on this list, but those are just very loose adaptations compared to Lord of the Rings, which is a straight up, this is the story that J.R.R. Tolkien told, but trimmed down and streamlined for a film-going audience. And like most great movies, it's a very deceptively simple premise. Hobbit named Frodo and his band of misfits travel across Middle-earth to destroy a magic ring in a volcano. But again, it's so much more than that, and it's about so much, and you don't need me to go on. I could go on for hours talking about Lord of the Rings. It's one of my favorite just pieces of media ever. As are anything that cracked my top 15 are all the best within their respective genres or whatever. Except, I wouldn't call Lord of the Rings the best fantasy film, because number 7 on my list is Wizard of Oz, which is a loose adaptation of L. Frank Baum's first book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, or first Oz book, rather. I'm pretty sure he wrote other things before that. But yeah, all you have to do to enjoy this movie is have a pulse. I can't think of any reason why anybody would actively dislike it. Maybe call it overrated. Maybe say that it's way too high on my list. Maybe say that, I'm a hack for having such a very easy layup movie this high on my list. But, the cliche picks for best movies of all time are the cliche picks for a reason. But I will say, as much as I love this movie, it's not even my favorite movie from that year. We'll get to that in a minute. Number 6 is The Dark Knight, the top-ranked Christopher Nolan movie, and the third one we'll be talking about. This is the best Batman movie, it's the best superhero movie, and it has one of the tightest scripts of any movie I've ever seen. It's one of those movies that's just so airtight that if you were to remove a scene, the entire thing just completely fucking unravels and makes no goddamn sense. You really do need every single line of dialogue, every single moment, every single inflection, every single little wink and nod from the actors in order for this movie to make any sense. It is more than just Heath Ledger's Joker that steals the show. He's the standout, he's the best performance, but he's also the one that's given the most to work with in the script. Again, Christopher Nolan's character writing is a little flat and wooden. He tends to have characters that just fulfill specific plot roles, which, valid. I'm guilty of that myself. I literally, in my first book, The Hellfire Brats, I literally created the villains just to give the heroes something to fight. So I can't really judge too harshly on that basis, and obviously I'm not judging hard on that basis. This movie is number fucking 6 on my 100 movie list. But cracking the top 5 is Toy Story, a movie I've talked about at length before. It's my favorite animated movie. It's very near and dear to my heart. Toy Story is one of those sacred cows that it was better as a trilogy. I love Toy Story 2 just as much as the first Toy Story. I love Toy Story 3 just a smidge less, but there is something just magical about that first movie and about how groundbreaking it was, and how that groundbreaking technology, again, wasn't just a tech demo. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, we have this new technology, let's build a story around it. It was, hey, we have this new technology, let's build it around a story. It's a difference in approach that I appreciate. Number 4 on my list is It's a Wonderful Life, the first and not the last Frank Capra movie, and the second and not the last James Stewart movie we'll be talking about. This is a Christmas movie. It's about George Bailey. It's his life story as told from the perspective of an angel and God, I guess. This kind of slice of life, very methodical. It's a lot slower pace, but in the last 20 minutes, which are the best 20 minutes in all the film, everything kind of comes together and clicks. Because you were just seeing these random snippets of his life. You were seeing these massive turning points in his life that you didn't understand were the massive turning points in his life, and massive turning points in the lives of all of those around him, because you didn't have the full picture. But once you have that full picture, once you see that last 20 minutes and see what it was actually all building up to, I kind of can't help but reflect on my own life and be like, oh my god, I've been through so much, and it was all worth it. This movie makes me want to live. Number 3 is Godfather Part II from 1974. I love Godfather. It's great. It's a classic for a reason. I have a problem with Godfather's pacing. Godfather Part II, despite being significantly longer than the first parts, I think handles its runtime better than the first movie did. It doesn't jump around as much. It's a lot more narratively tight than the first movie, and that's why it's on this list and the first movie is not. That's all the difference it makes. Classic gangster movie based very loosely on Mario Puzo's Godfather books, and it is the story of how Michael Corleone fell from grace, and it's super fucked up and tragic. Makes me want to die. Good thing I have It's a Wonderful Life to make me want to live. Number 2 is a movie I've talked about numerous times, both on Twitter, Discord, and on YouTube. I've made at least 2 separate videos talking about this movie. It's my favorite movie that doesn't have laser swords. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. James Stewart plays Jefferson Smith, a small town hero in the Midwest who gets appointed to the vacant Senate seat in his unnamed state, and then fights against the corruption of Washington in a no-holds-barred, knockdown, drag-out verbal fight that ends with someone nearly committing suicide. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and His Wonderful Life have a lot more in common than you would think at face value. But yeah, this movie is just immaculately written. I watch it at least once a year, and it holds up every time. But number 1, you knew it was coming. Star Wars, 1977, A New Hope, George Lucas. Luke Skywalker is played by Mark Hamill. He's a farm boy with a big dream who joins the rebellion, loses his mentor, blows up the Death Star, and becomes a hero, and then they didn't make any... No, I'm just kidding. I love the Star Wars trilogy. I even like the prequels. I was okay with the sequels when I first watched them, but my opinion on Star Wars as a whole has soured a lot in the past few years. But Star Wars, as its own self-contained movie, is still just one of the greatest movies of all time, and it's a landmark title, a groundbreaking movie. Again, not just a gimmick. But yeah, those were my top 30 favorite movies. What are your favorite movies? Like, comment, subscribe, and buy my book, The Hellfire Brats. Use code NightWatchAgent1 to get 30% off the ebook for the entire month of August. I'm Mediocrity4. Thanks for watching.